in watching this, and there are some really good reasons for that. One is that animated film musicals, which are actually a pretty new thing. You don't know this, right? Because Beauty and the Beast, right, was made, that was like made for a film animated musical before it ever got put on Broadway on stage with human actors and actresses. So that was kind of a new thing that started in our world. So film musical actually grew out of like a Broadway musical theater. That makes a lot of sense, right? And you're actually, when you're making your, what is your musical called?
We're doing Frostbite.
Frostbite, about
A Tale of Two Sisters.
So you're actually kind of taking part of the animated film and putting it back on the stage, right? And you're becoming the characters. So you're doing this inventive kind of backwards thing that the films have done also. Can you think of some other things, any other musicals that started as a movie and then have become Broadway musical theater pieces? Little Mermaid, yes. Rapunzel has done it too. I'm just accepting every answer. Has Snow White done that?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
All Disney movies.
All Disney movies. Somebody said, well, a great idea. People love Disney movies. Let's put them on the stage and tour them around and people will love it. Right? They'll buy tickets for it. Yes.
Shrek.
Shrek did, absolutely.
Aladdin.
Aladdin
I
did.
saw a play of Aladdin.
Excellent. I thought of Wicked. Didn't start that way too?
That's what my shirt
What
is.
else? Isn't it?
Mary
Isn't it kind
Poppins.
of Mary Poppins. Oh, I love that. Some go back and forth.
It was the first breath.
The Muppets.
Has the Muppets done it too? They become like a Broadway play? I'm not surprised. Even when I haven't heard about it, I'm not surprised when that's happening.
Wicked started out as a book.
It started out as a book, which was like a spin-off, right, from The Wizard of Oz. So it was a book that was written after a book and then went through that whole process. You know, if we like the story, we're going to take it in every form, right? And see how it works out. Does it work out well with music? Especially the music that was written for it? Do you like it? Whatever.
The Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz, absolutely. It started as a book, right? And then it became a movie, and then it became a play, right? And people do it all the time. They do it at Tuacahn. They did it at Tuacahn this summer, I think. Peter Pan? Absolutely. So isn't that interesting? So film musical, animated film musical grew out of musical theater. And actually, that term, musical theater, I just learned this last year, came out of musical comedies. They used to all be comedies. When Fred Astaire, his movies, and musical theater from that time period, they always called it musical comedy. But they had a problem with Showboat in the 1920s, and then with Oklahoma. Do you know Oklahoma, the musical? Oh, Oklahoma, Oklahoma. Oh, you got to see Oklahoma. See it on a movie. Or see it on the stage. Somebody's doing it soon.
Yeah.
Hale Theater doing Oklahoma
It's
soon?
in Boston.
I think so. Anyway, it has serious themes in it. So they couldn't quite call it a musical comedy. So they changed the whole name of the art form to musical theater. And that's why you can do Les Mis, Phantom of the Opera, that have kind of serious themes, as well as some lighter kind of moments in it. But that originally, so if I had like a chalkboard here, I'd write film musical, grew out of musical theater, grew out of musical comedy, and then overarching all of that is the art form of opera. And the word opera the art form started in Italy in the 1600s. I'm going to look up here too. In the 1600s, during the Renaissance, and there were composers at that time period who thought, we love music, we love theater, let's put them together. They haven't been put together in the way that we experience. You know, sometimes they'd have plays, and during intermission they'd have musical numbers. And sometimes somebody would sing something, but it wasn't with a whole orchestra going through the whole thing. So in 1600 that started, and I gave a handout to the teachers that's just a history of opera. I actually made it for an introduction to opera class. And if you went through, you would see opera hasn't been the same during all those 400 years. Because what happens in all of this kind of in musical theater, in Frozen, and in every opera that's existed since 1600 is that there's music, so there's a composer, there's drama, so it's like everything that has to do with a play on stage, and somebody being incredibly inventive. And sometimes the inventiveness means they're borrowing something from someone else. So when Beauty and the Beast, when the Broadway musical is made, they're kind of borrowing from the movie, right? They're taking the music from the movie and they're putting it on the stage. Sometimes there's a famous opera that Utah Opera is doing right now called Madame Butterfly. And there's a Broadway musical called Miss Saigon, which uses the story from Madame Butterfly, but instead of having it happen in around 1900 in Japan, it's happening during the Vietnam War. Because they saw that the same kind of story still worked in a different place. But they borrowed the story from someplace else, and then they kind of reinvented it, and people liked it. And then they added a helicopter flying in on stage, and that's what everybody remembers now about that. So if you just think musical theater and opera, film, musicals, they all are music and theater and somebody being really creative. And every time you guys are part of a production, you're doing the same thing. You may not be writing the music, you may not be creating the story or the words, but your inventiveness is part of it as well. And that's one of the things that we all love so much about being part of the theater and of going to the theater. We want to have our imagination sparked somehow. So, this handout, I'm not, you guys, you would just need to make a paper airplane out of it. But it goes like from the 1600s, at first they only had plays in the 1600s. They had plays about gods and kings and stuff like that. And then it was a huge innovation to have stories about everyday people. Nobody had thought of doing that before. And part of that was because the kings were the ones paying the bills. So they made the stories about the kings. But then more and more people got interested in them, and they made play-going something that all the people could go to. And then there are just changes. Somebody tries something new. Somebody says, all of our operas are serious. We need to laugh. If we're going out for the evening to the theater, perhaps sometimes we need to laugh. So every country that made opera started making a musical comedy kind of version. We call it musical theater now. In France, they called it opéra comique. Does anyone take French? Opéra comique. Yay, French.
Well, I'm a ballerina.
So you got some French. You know some French.
Only ballerina, only ballet words, but.
Yeah, but because it started in France, in the world of opera, it started in Italy. So we have lots of Italian terms. And anybody who plays a musical instrument, right, knows some Italian? What Italian do you know? Does anyone?
Forte, piano, and
Yeah.
mezzo piano.
Yeah. These are all. Look at how your Italian just rolls off. And then you can add pizza, linguine, and you do this with your hand, and it makes you have the right accent. So things are changing all the time, and it's very exciting. And one of the things that my opera company does is that we keep all of that tradition alive. So we do operas by Mozart. We wrote, in the late 1700s. We're doing an opera right now, Madame Butterfly, which was written in 1904. And we're doing Pearl Fishers by Bizet, who wrote Carmen. You might know some of the music from that was written in the 1870s. So we keep that tradition alive, and then we also try to be part of new adventures. Sometimes it's just making a new set. Sometimes it is investing in a composer to write something new, and for opera singers. So at the end of this hour, I'm really going to focus on the one thing that I think really makes opera different from musical theater and from Frozen in particular, and that's the kind of voice training that singers have and the way that it sounds. Because part of keeping the tradition of opera alive is keeping the tradition alive of the kind of singing that happened when there were no microphones. So in opera singing, people produce their own megaphones out of their own bodies, which is amazing and is my favorite thing about opera, and it's why I am still, after 17 years of working for Utah Opera, I still just get blown away by the human voice. So that's my favorite thing. So that's what I'll introduce you to at the end. But I wanted to talk, first of all, about